From the land of conjurers flying through the internet to your device like a UAP, hauntingly unexplained and downright weird, this is the Witching Hours, and we are ready to take off in the flash of an eye. Good evening to one and all, wherever and whenever you are listening to this program. I am Johnny the Frost, and joining me, as always, is the medium Jenny Lee. How are you doing tonight, Jenny?
I'm here. That's about all I can say.
Yeah.
But I'm excited to talk about ghosts.
Yeah, we got some interesting things to talk about tonight. Some stuff you've heard us talk about already. We'll get into that in a moment. I guess tonight we'll go ahead. Well, welcome in everyone. Nice to see everyone in here again. We've been looking forward to the show all week, so we're glad to see you all here. Thank you. And man, I'm always I can't every week now. It's like the Lingua song in the load. I'm ready for the dance party. It's awesome. So it gets me going. It's like I have to hear it. Yeah, I have to hear it before the show gets started. So off we go.
Yes.
All right, let's go ahead and do it. We'll get into the weird news.
Yay. What kind of weird stuff is going on this week?
Yeah, well, we got a couple things. One of them specifically is one we've kind of been keeping up with, and that's the spacecraft Voyager. We had kind of talked how it had lost contact. NASA was kind of thinking that maybe that was the end of the road. The mission had already gone on a lot longer than they had originally anticipated when the spacecraft was launched. But NASA has finally heard back from Voyager 1 again. The most distant spacecraft from Earth stopped sending back understandable data last November. Flight controllers traced a blank communication to a bad computer chip and rearranged the spacecraft's coding to work around the trouble. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Southern California declared success after receiving good engineering updates late last week. The team is still working to restore transmission of the science data. It takes 22 and a half hours to send a signal to Voyager 1, more than 15 billion miles away in interstellar space. The signal travel time is double that for a round trip. So I guess 45 hours to send a message and then to get a message back.
Wow.
Contact was never lost. Rather, it was like making a phone call where you can't hear
Voyager's
the person
leaving
on the
us
other
on
end.
the red. Voyager's leaving us on the red.
We had a bad bit rate. Launched in 1977. Did we get the little disconnection sign with like the emote with the hands, in the
Yeah.
Launched in 1977 to study Jupiter and Saturn, Voyager 1 has been exploring interstellar space, the space between star systems, since 2012. Its twin Voyager 2 is 12.6 billion miles away and still working fine. So
nice.
I don't know.
Well, they don't build them like they used to.
I've included these news stories a lot, and if you don't know, I'm a little bit of obsessed with like Voyager 1 and 2. I mean, to have man-made objects that are now outside of our solar system.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
The fastest speed that humans have obtained, it's quite an accomplishment, I think. So anyway. Number 2, brains are getting bigger, and researchers reveal why it's a big deal.
They are?
Yeah. Which, is the opposite of what
feels contrary to.
Well, I know that, I think it was Neanderthal that actually had a larger brain than humans. And also I know that roughly human brain size has stayed essentially the same throughout evolution. Yeah. So this story kind of struck me by surprise, but scientists at UC Davis Health revealed that brains from people born in the 1970s had a 6.6 higher volume and 15% greater surface area than brains from people born in the 1930s.
That's quite a big difference.
It was surprising to me. The study was published in the JAMA Neurology in March. Genetics play a major role in determining brain size, but our findings indicate external influences such as health, social, cultural, and educational factors may also play a role. Charles DeCarli, author of the study and distinguished professor of neurology at UC Davis, told Science Daily, the researchers combed through evidence from the Framingham Heart Study, which is a community-based study based in Framingham, Massachusetts, that has gone on for 75 years and now includes second and third generation participants. The participants, it goes on, it talks about the number. There's over 3,000 participants, and they're just showing an increase in brain volume.
Wow.
Which I don't think is something that was really known before. So,
no.
Yeah. So that's an interesting study. So our brains are getting bigger. That's been proposed by some people in the time travel theory.
Fooled me.
When we talk about some of those extraterrestrials that people see, about whether we're seeing, how humans could possibly change in the future. I don't know. Maybe that's some proof to back up that theory there.
We're going to end up with real big heads.
Real big heads. and if anyone's like me, I seem to go more blind every day. So I think we could probably get some larger eyes too.
Yeah. Can we get some better eyeballs? That would be great.
A scientist says he has the evidence that we live in a simulation. University of Portsmouth scientist Melvin Vobson, who studies the possibility that the universe might indeed be a digital facsimile, leans into the cinematic comparison with the Matrix in an article published on the website. The conversation this past October, Vobson invoked the Wachowski sci-fi masterpiece, and around the same time, he published a book on the subject, Reality Reloaded, a subtle hat tip to the title of the less successful Matrix sequel. While he is just one among many who have contemplated the idea, Vobson claims to have one thing that those before him lacked, and that's evidence. He says, in physics, there are laws that govern everything that happens in the universe. For example, how objects move, how energy flows, and so on. Everything is based on the laws of physics. One of the most powerful laws is the second law of thermodynamics, which establishes that entropy, a measure of disorder in an isolated system, can only increase or stay the same, but will never decrease. All right. So I probably lost most people already, but we're going to keep going. So based on this law,
you made my bigger brain hurt.
Yeah, the bigger brains are struggling. Vobson similarly expected
not big enough for that sentence.
Entropy in information systems, which his previous research defined as a fifth state of matter, should similarly increase over time, but it doesn't. Instead, it remains constant or even decreases to a minimum value. This is in direct contrast to the second law of thermodynamics, which he is stating could be evidence for a digitalized simulation.
Okay.
Article goes on, but I'll leave it there. It's a little bit more. A little bit more.
I don't know. I mean, I think if you are under the assumption that it's all made of light, then maybe it is like a hologram of some sort.
I mean, I don't think we've had a guest on specifically to talk about the simulation or a digital universe. I mean, that's something that we probably need to get into because it's not just
don't we have Mark Hunter Brooks coming back on? Like, is he on next week?
Yeah, I think it's next week, actually.
We should ask him what he thinks about that. I bet he's got some thoughts.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting because I remember when, obviously, it kind of came along with that movie where it was being kind of hypothesized by people, but it's starting to become kind of like being a thing that's being put out there by legit scientists that, there's evidence of a
it's
digital.
Probably still not anything what we actually think it is, though.
No, probably not.
Because we're not supposed to know these things.
And the last story for tonight is right down my alley because it's a history story. Plato's burial place finally revealed after AI deciphers ancient scroll carbonized in Mount Vesuvius eruption.
Oh, good job, AI. You get a gold star.
We can talk good about AI this week. It's not the
we won't shit talk AI this time.
So the decipherment of an ancient scroll has revealed where the Greek philosopher Plato is buried, Italian researchers suggest. So a philosopher at the University of Pisa and colleagues useful artificial intelligence to decipher text preserved on charred pieces of papyrus recovered in Herculaneum an ancient Roman town located near Pompeii, according to a translated statement from Italy's National Research Council.
Was that, I don't know, does it have a picture of it? And it looks like a little charred like turd, but it was like all rolled up and they scanned it. Yeah. I saw a picture of that.
So like Pompeii, Herculaneum was destroyed in AD 79 when Mount Vesuvius erupted, cloaking the region in ash and pyroclastic flows. One of the scrolls carbonized by the eruption includes the writings of Philodemus of Gadara, an Epicurean philosopher who studied in Athens and later lived in Italy. The text is known as the History of Academy. Details the academy that Plato founded in the 4th century BC and gives details about Plato's life, including his burial place. So they go through it, and the article goes on. They were able to use infrared and ultraviolet optical imaging, thermal imaging, tomography to read the ancient papyrus, which is now at the collection of the National Library of Naples. So far, they have identified 1,000 words, or roughly 30% of the text written by Philodemus. And
I would like to also give a gold star to the archaeologists that figured out that was some papyrus rolled up and not a turd.
Yeah, I mean, it's a
gold
lot
star for that person.
It's a lot of crazy work that.
Yeah, how amazing that we have the tools to read something that has been burned out,
That's burned. You can't even open it up. Like it's still rolled up. Like there's no way. I mean, 50 years ago, it's lost to history, and now it's legible in some way. Yeah. So among the most important news, we read that Plato was buried in the garden reserved for him, a private area intended for a Platonic school of the Academy in Athens, near the so-called Museon, or sacred to the Muses. Researchers wrote in the statement, until now it is only known that he was buried generically in the academy. The text also detailed how Plato was sold into slavery, sometimes between 404 and 399 BC, and it was previously thought that had occurred in 387, so they're able to get the dates a little more accurate on things. Another part of the translated text describes a dialogue between characters in which Plato shows disdain for the musical and rhythmic abilities of a barbarian from Thrace, according to the statement. So those dang non-Greek speakers, just
playing their music
and gyrating some way that is not, good gracious.
He must have been the Elvis of ancient Greece.
Oh, well, there we go, guys. That was the news.
Nice. Good news stories this week.
All right, guys, we got a good show for you. We've been talking this one up for a while, and we've been excited to do this one. So tonight we have Beth and Chris Houlihan on from Haunts of Richmond, with a Master's of Education and Bachelor's degree in Theater and Writing from St. Lawrence University in Canton, New York, sharing her passion for history and spirits. So we're going to have a lot in common, I think, here, with an audience that has always come naturally to Beth. Beth started as a ghost guide with Haunts of Richmond in 2008, but that wasn't her first time sharing spooky tales. She wrote the script for the St. Lawrence University Ghost Tour that is still occasionally offered to visiting alumni. Beth has had brushes with the paranormal for most of her life and is always seeking out more information about hauntings and the history behind them. Today, she is the president of the Haunts of Richmond and also serves as the creative director and head tour guide. As an engineer by trade with a degree in civil engineering and an MBA from Clarkson University in Potsdam, New York, Chris' interest in haunted history is rooted in years of reading ghost stories and visiting historic and haunted locations. Chris started as a greeter for Haunts of Richmond in 2009, and today serves as the company's vice president. While he mostly keeps things ticking behind the scenes with research, marketing, finance, and more, you can catch him out sharing spooky historic tales as well. Guys, please welcome to the show Beth and Chris from Haunts of Richmond. And I got to unmute them. There we go.
Thank you for having us tonight.
And if you unmute us, you're going to hear a purring kitten.
That's okay. We'll take that.
Yeah,
I love kitties.
He's in the voice. You can't see him. He's right here.
He blends in with my shirt, but he's here.
He likes to hog the spotlight anytime we're on camera.
We always have cat issues too, sis. You're good. We're the same.
Yeah, ours sneaks in with the with the promise of wanting to lay in your lap, and then slowly makes her way onto the table, and then tries to
On a
turn off the computer. And
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
There is a higher than average chance that you will see a cat take over the camera at some point.
I mean, we do have 4 of them.
There's
So.
4 of them, and well, one's on my lap, 2 of them are circling,
Yep.
and you just bit me, you little snot. Anyways,
He knows you guys are talking about him.
Yeah.
He's like, in the star here.
All right. So I guess the first question of the night, to kind of start at the beginning, how did you both kind of, I read in the bio, but how did you guys kind of get started with the Haunts of Richmond? And in general, how did you guys kind of get to a point where you wanted to deal with paranormal investigation?
So what happened was our longest running guide, Marsha, was a co-teacher with me. And she said, hey, I'm giving ghost tours. Come on a tour. We went on a tour. And after the tour, she says, we're hiring. I said, I'm there.
Excellent.
And I started the next year. So,
yep. And as for me, when I came on board, the company had 2 tours. And one of them, the flagship tour, the Shadows of Shaco, was starting out of the Poe Museum in Shaco Bottom. Now, my story of coming on board with the company is kind of an interesting one.
it's due to a ghost.
Yeah, it's actually a little bit of a ghost story.
Sweet.
Yeah, so since the tour was starting in the Poe Museum, which is a stop on our Shadows of Shaco tour, they one of the rules there was that part of the agreement was that a member of the Poe Museum staff had to be there to open up the museum so that we could come in and do the tours in the evenings. Makes sense.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, that responsibility almost invariably fell to one member of the staff who loved going ahead and putting in the extra hours in the evening. And well, let's just say, very long story short, one evening, one of the resident ghosts decided to get a little active with Erica while she was sitting there in the museum while the tour had been since gone out into the Shaco Bottom neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And when the tour comes back, Erica's completely freaked out. Calm her down. The guide goes out into the parking lot with Erica, and Erica, before she explains exactly what's going on, gets on the phone and calls her boss.
Man.
Yeah.
I was hired the next day.
I was hired the next day. Now I was a very convenient person to hire because, well, Beth and I, we've been married since long before she started giving the tours. And I would oftentimes accompany her to the neighborhood while she was giving a tour. Sometimes I would walk the tour with her, but more often than not, I would wind up in one of the neighborhood bars, going ahead and having a drink or two while she's
There's some good ones down there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And he was at one of the haunted ones.
Yes. Yep. But yeah, it got to the point where basically she'd kind of go, she'd wrap up a tour, she'd come back and find that I probably had drank her paycheck away. So anyways, when they needed somebody to replace Erica and none of the Poe Museum staffers were ready to go ahead and step in and fill that role, they're like, well, we got somebody. So I technically came on board. I was hired by the Poe Museum for the express purpose of coming in and being that staff member to unlock the doors for Richmond in the evening. And now, since then, I did that for a couple of years, 2 or 3 years before Haunts of Richmond and the Poe Museum amicably parted ways. We're still on very good terms with them. We love them, try to send as many people to them as they can, and they, in turn, will send people our way. But when that official relationship came to an end, I came on board with Haunts of Richmond, and, well, we're still here doing it today.
And that has been a long time.
Yes.
It's been a minute. Yep. Yeah. And then our story goes on for several more years. The founders of the company, Scott and Sandy, decided to retire at the end of the 2015 season. And they looked at us and said, hey, do you want to pick it up and run with it? And so we did. We've been running Haunts of Richmond since January 2016.
Wow.
Wow. Well, congratulations on that. And
Thank
just
you.
so everybody knows, yeah, we do. In Richmond, there is the Poe Museum, and it's dedicated to exactly who you think that is, Edgar Allan Poe.
Edgar
So that's
Allan
one of the
Poe, yes.
cool places we do have in Richmond, and we're going to talk probably about a lot of cool places in Richmond tonight.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but like the original part of that museum, that part that sits on Broad Street, isn't that the oldest house still existing?
Yes,
like
it
from
is.
Is it from the 1600s?
It was on the land grant in 1737. We think it was built maybe within a decade before that.
Okay.
Yeah,
1700s.
Yeah, it was in 1737, give or take a few years, is kind of the it's not established. I would say well accepted age for it. I have seen some writing that says that maybe it did go back as early as the 1600s, but that was more of a theory than it was an actual documentation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. So I wanted to go back a little bit further to perhaps one of your childhood experiences for in either one of you can start.
As far as experiences, I'm the one you're talking to. Chris doesn't have them.
not really.
Yeah.
You know, so
He's what we call,
you just married into it.
Yeah, he's what we call a chiller. He's been around me when I've experienced, but he has not personally experienced them.
I mean, not as much as you, and definitely. I mean,
you've heard footsteps.
Yes, for me, it's a very absolutely minuscule degree to what you have experienced. That said, I've always had a love and fascination for the spooky stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, my parents have taken me, me and my brother, when we were growing up. We went to a lot of historic sites. I always loved the little spooky aspects of those sites as well. So I've always had a fascination and a love for it. I'm not somebody who's had a lot of experiences.
Whereas I've been having them since I was 6.
Tell us about it.
So my dad was a minister. We moved around and lived in parsonages every 3 to 5 years, new place. And let's just say my imaginary friends were ghostly. So yeah, I remember very distinctly having conversations with entities in the house. My mother would walk in and be like, "Oh, she's talking to her imaginary friend." My father, on the other hand, I'm pretty sure he is a reincarnated shaman, and he walked in and he goes, "Oh, you see it too."
Oh, wow.
So I was like, okay, so it's not just me. My sister has the ability to see him, and we found out recently that our niece and nephew have the ability as well. So it seems to be traveling through the bloodline.
That's amazing. Mm-hmm. So your father is a minister, you said?
Yeah.
But he was okay with, like, because he was experiencing it too? He was
definitely experiencing it. My father was never a traditional minister. Mm-hmm. He definitely looked at other faiths and brought those ideas into the church with him. Which put him apart from several others.
Yeah, that's very unusual. Yeah. So you had
interesting though, yeah.
Yeah, so you had little kid. So you had as a child, you had the imaginary ghost friends.
Mm-hmm.
So then going into adulthood, that was still occurring for you.
Still occurring to me, still occurring to today. I consider myself a sensitive. I don't consider myself psychic because I don't actively try to communicate. Mm-hmm. I will if they want me to, but it's not something I seek. But there'll be times when I walk around historic areas and I'll do a quick nope because I will sense the bad energy there. We were actually in Savannah a couple of years ago at the Sorrel Weed House, and our guide at the beginning of the ghost tour says there's one room in the house that somebody always does a nope. I'm not going to tell you what room it is. I want to see who does it this time. And sure enough, we ended up at the carriage house. I walked in. I went, nope, out of here. He's like, you sent it too? I'm like, oh, yes, there's some bad juju in that room.
It is admittedly a very creepy room in its own right.
Yes.
But there's nothing in there. It's just a bizarre little space that's tucked away on the second floor of that carriage house.
It's an extremely heavy feel.
Yes. So.
Yikes.
So yeah, you didn't last 2 seconds.
No, I didn't.
So for you, is it like like a sensing and knowing? Do you see things with your eyes? Like, what's the experience for you?
I see things. I sense energy shifts. Occasionally I will hear, but it's more of I sense what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say it's more of an empathic ability. Mm-hmm. I will sense emotions easily with them, and I will sense where bad things have happened. So a lot of negative energies. I have a hard time going through Gettysburg.
Oh, yeah. I can imagine. Yeah.
We haven't been there yet.
I love it, but I have a hard time going through it.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't been to Gettysburg yet, which is kind of embarrassing because we're close enough to be able to make that trip pretty easily. I think we're going to try to go this summer, though. I think we're possibly have that on our radar.
Yeah.
So we'll get to see what kind of vibes we get from that.
Yeah, definitely worth the trip. Definitely worth spending at least a couple days.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've heard nothing but good things from others that we've talked about that have gone there to do investigations or even just been there to like spend the day, and they're like, yep, very haunted.
Yeah. Admittedly, we haven't been there for any investigative stuff. At least not as of yet. We've taken a couple of the ghost tours up there. But other than that, we've just gone as tourists.
Yeah. We never had a chance to actually do like Gettysburg Bash or any of the paranormal weekends that are up there just because our schedules don't always work.
Yeah.
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 We have to plan things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. That's what we're trying to do now. We're kind of getting the lay of the land for the summer of what's going on and trying to tack on a couple things to go check out anyway. But so that's interesting. So being sensitive, do you try to incorporate that into your investigations, or do you try to not, or do you like try to stay away from that when you're doing your investigations?
Will incorporate it if somebody pushes at me that they want to be heard and seen. I'll use it when I'm doing the SD session, but it's not something I deliberately try to open up to. I want, mostly as a leader of an investigation, I want those who are participating in it to be feeling more than me. I don't want to be leading them somewhere and them not experiencing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, because I think that's an interesting dynamic because obviously that's become, more popular, I think, to have, psychics and mediums on investigations. I think it creates its own set of like different circumstances to know how to incorporate that, which I think some people do well. But yeah, so I was curious and how you did that. So you mostly stick to your typical investigation style. And then if something specifically comes through, then that's when you kind of speak up.
Yeah, I'll hint at it if I get a name or if I get a sense of like a female or a male. I'll drop some hints and questioning just to see if we can draw them out to actually interact with people. There are other times where I choose not to go into certain locations just because I've had a negative experience there and I don't want to put myself back in that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we had a rather interesting, since you guys have been to Hanover Tavern and on the investigations, you're familiar with the jail.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one place I don't go.
Okay.
We just offered them whiskey and seemed like they were okay.
Yeah, the first time I went in there, Charles jumped me.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so I stopped going in there for a while, and then we were on another investigation for the Paracon, and I ended up being in there with a couple of the members of CPRI who happened to be police officers. And he tried to jump me again. I said, look, I've got 2 officers here who will put you back in your cell if you don't leave me alone. And he backed off.
Yeah.
So guess I just need to make sure I go in there with them.
Yeah. Yeah, take the police officers with you. Where else have been some places that you don't go?
I will go back to it just because it's cool, and that is the catacombs in Edinburgh. We happened to, we went to Scotland during August one year and ended up taking tours with Meerkat Tour Company. They're the ones who own a portion of the catacombs. We were told by a guide who had actually been in there that be careful of the Watcher. He apparently goes after quite a few people. I was like, okay, noted. What room do I need to be aware of this? And she told me. So I was like, okay, prepared, ready to go in. Had my, blessed medallions with me and that sort of thing. And sure enough, we went through the catacombs. We got into the room where the Watcher is. Our guide had the experience at the door, so I went to the other end of the room and had the brick wall right behind me, and he grabbed my necklace and yanked it back.
Oh my goodness.
And I was like, okay, noted.
That the Watcher, Mr. Boots?
Mr. Boots, yeah.
Mr. Boots.
Yeah. And we enjoyed the experience so much we went back the next night. Different tour, same catacombs, and I was like, not going in the back of the room. Stayed at the door this time. And he breathed right in my ear and touched my back. I'm like, okay, we're done.
All right, Mr. Boots, back off, buddy.
Yep.
Well, that's interesting too, because, you know, a lot of people, when they first get started, I think one of the initial reactions for investigation is like going to graveyards and cemeteries. And I've always kind of thought that wasn't, just my own personal opinion, maybe wasn't a good place to start, because I don't know if spirits stay there, but catacombs is like a whole, that's a whole, that's a whole other level.
I will agree with you. I don't think there's a lot of hauntings in cemeteries because a lot of people aren't attached to that area.
Yeah.
They usually will haunt someplace where there was trauma or someplace that they were attached to, that sort of thing. With that being said, we do have some hauntings in local cemeteries.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that could be for a variety of reasons.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, by and large, in general, people don't necessarily spend a lot of time and get that emotionally attached to a place where they are eventually buried.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Yeah,
sure, sometimes, but
I've always felt like when I go into a cemetery, they're always really peaceful and quiet.
Yes, which is why I love to go there for me time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. So I imagine the catacombs just had to be a wild experience.
Oh yeah, highly recommend. 10 out of 10. If you get a chance to go. And I'm dying to get to the ones in Paris.
I was just getting ready to ask that. Have you thought about going to France?
I have. The one time I was in Paris, I was in high school and my group was not going. Like, come on. No.
that's a shame. Definitely a missed opportunity there.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you could get me to go into just about any haunted place. I don't know. You might have to like give me a strong shove to get me down in the catacombs.
Have the flask ready. Got it.
Yeah. Oh boy. Off we. Yeah.
We'll see the Edinburgh ones. They weren't particularly.
Well, they weren't gruesome.
They weren't gruesome. They weren't claustrophobic. They were basically disused storage space, which had at least initially been storage space, but then it did evolve to a point where people were living down there for extended periods of time, and it did get to be a kind of a shady place where less than savory activities took place.
Yes.
But it was never. It's certainly completely different from the Paris catacombs,
where you've got bones, lots of them.
And I could imagine like just my two brains fighting each other there, like history brain on one hand and then paranormal brain on the other, like arguing about who's going to take control of that visit.
Oh yes.
We're going to be in a similar situation next week when we go up to Seattle and go check out the tunnels there.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah. Apparently they don't have ghost tours of the tunnels. So
at least not this time of year.
At least not right now. So if we take the underground tour, it's going to be a straight up history tour, but it's going to kind of be hard to detach that the spooky part of the brain while we're doing that.
That doesn't mean you can't ask the questions.
Yeah, there will be questions.
Yeah.
We will. Yeah. We are planning on signing up and doing a ghost tour as well. Yeah. But yes.
Well, I mean, those two things kind of go hand in hand. We're not too terribly far away from Pamplin Historical Park, and I know I've just always known it. I mean, obviously it's a battlefield, so things like that are going to happen. But I saw that on one of the ghost paranormal shows recently, and I was like, I didn't even realize that was a big thing going on there. I imagine it could have been. But,
you drive past it going to work every day.
Drive past it every day. And I think that's one of the things for paranormal investigation specifically is like, you don't have to go out to the graveyard. You can go pretty much anywhere and find things.
Yeah.
Well, very easily. Yeah. I mean, it's During the day in particular, a lot of national parks, particularly the battlefields, of course, you can go and walk the battlefields during the day. Oftentimes, it's very easy to find a quiet space so you can go ahead and break out an audio recorder or something like that.
People have had full out conversations with what they thought was a reenactor, and it ended up being an entity.
Yeah.
I remember when I was a teacher, we actually did an event at Pamplin and actually had students reenacting journal entries from the soldiers that were there. And several of them saw soldiers that were not part of the program there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I will say right off the top, one of the things that we almost always tell people is that the ghosts don't just come out at night.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a lot of the investigations in that, it's much easier to do them at night because that's when things are quiet.
Yeah.
That's when, if there is going to be some sort of visual phenomena, it's much easier to see like light phenomena when it's dark outside.
Mm-hmm.
So it's certainly the spirits are pretty much, they're always there. They're always going to be with us. But a lot of the reasons that we do the investigations at nighttime is just it's quieter, it's darker, it's easier to pick up on those audio and visual cues in the dead of the night than it is during the daytime. But I definitely encourage people, if they want to go to a place and try to investigate a place that's not going to be open to you coming in after dark, don't hesitate to go on out and do it during the day.
Yeah.
Just be respectful.
Yeah. Always be respectful.
Yeah. No trespassing, people.
Yeah.
Trespassing.
So nighttime better for us, not necessarily better for them. Yeah, I mean, because we've done some investigation during the day and had just as much success as we have doing investigations at night. But especially if you're using like laser grids and, like you said, wanted to see any kind of light phenomena or just really. And I think the biggest thing is that quiet, like,
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Especially for capturing EVPs. Like if there's any background noise, it pretty much just shoots it in the foot. So,
yep. So what is one of your favorite places in Richmond?
I'm gonna have to say the John Marshall House is one of our favorites. It's one of the places where we actually can go inside when we partner with them, and you get to hear stories from their docents and also from members of CPRI, who is the group that has investigated that location. Just about every tour we've been on, something has happened, which has been absolutely remarkable.
Neat.
It's not something we advertise, but it's like, okay, it's happened again. We got something else to add to our stories.
There we go.
What kind of things happen there?
We had one guest who came in with her husband. She went into what's known as Mary's room, and that's where two of the children died in the family there.
Yeah.
She got instantly nauseous and had to back out of the room. But it was actually the next day that she had her experience. They came back during the day to do the historical tour, and as she got up to the top of the stairs, she saw a woman in period dress, very distraught, walking out of that room and heading down to Polly's room. So we actually think she saw Polly.
Wow.
Yeah.
And speaking for myself, I got a soft spot for the Poe Museum.
You do.
I mean,
they gave you a job.
They did exactly that. But
they got you out of the bar.
Yeah, it got me out of the bar. I mean, and for me, I will say, I mean, there certainly was a hint of privilege of like. Oftentimes, I'd be in there by myself, dead of night, and it's like I'm sitting in the oldest place in the entirety of Richmond.
Yeah.
Place that's been here for hundreds of years now. And basically, they trusted me with the keys.
Yeah,
trusted me with the keys. I get to go in there. I can sit there by myself, and was doing whatever I did on any given night, whether it was doing some reading or crossword puzzles, whatever have you, while I was there while the tours were out. But yeah, I mean, but aside from the having that extra little bit of privilege that I had that went with that, it's just a fascinating site from one end to the other. There's of course, the fact that it is the Poe Museum. And at that point in time, when I was there actually working there in conjunction with the tours, it had already been there as a museum for 90 years. Now they've just had their 100-year anniversary. And being in this place that is dedicated to Edgar, and then not only that, but then all of the history that it had before that as this, which was basically a fairly humble residence in the city of Richmond. That this family lived in generation after generation. The Egges lived there for 150 years. Yeah. Wow. And so, yeah, there's certainly that air of privilege to it, but and then of course the historic side of it collides with the spooky stuff that we talk about there. And on any given tour, we really have to rein ourselves in when it comes to the Poe Museum.
We could spend 3 hours at the Poe Museum.
Yeah. You could do it if you were able to go inside and do a ghost tour today. You could do a fully fleshed out, hour and a half easy ghost tour just inside the Poe Museum, going from building to building, talking about the stories and the experiences that have taken place in each of the buildings there. So absolutely fascinating location. They've certainly, I'd say they certainly have distanced themselves from doing the investigations like they used to allow, which is fine. And I understand it actually makes sense for them from a business standpoint. They really kind of got away from that in favor of hosting stuff like weddings and stuff like that.
But they still do spooky inspired things there. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
They just don't do investigations anymore.
They don't do the investigations after dark anymore, which I understand it. Don't blame them for that. Is it a little bit of a loss? Sure.
Yeah.
But it's just it's the way they're operating these days.
But investigating there also was getting harder because of the street noise.
It's a very busy street even at nighttime.
Yes.
Yeah. And that is something actually that has drastically changed in just the last 10 to 15 years in that area.
Yeah.
Because it's been just about that long since they've really opened their doors to having investigations there late at night. And if you go look back 10, 15 years ago in Chaco Bottom, there was still just a fraction of the people living in that neighborhood compared to what it is today.
Yeah. That was kind of the dead zone down there. And now it's totally built up. So much more traffic, so many more people.
Yeah. So it's not at all quiet down there in Chaco Bottom pretty much at any hour anymore.
No. So what were some of what were some of the exciting things that happens at the Poe Museum?
Well, Jonathan is the one who gave Chris his job. Yep. He's the little boy that runs around in the old stone house. He would play with items when the gift shop used to be in there. And to the point where the staff actually would get annoyed with him because they'd have to pick up after him.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yep.
And there's also an entity we call Kate. We're not sure if that's actually her name, but that seems to be the name that she responds to. We do know from historical research there were 3 Catherines in the family. So we're just not sure which one she may be.
So it's a good chance it might be a Kate.
Yeah. Regardless of who she is exactly, she does seem to have taken a little bit of a protector role over Jonathan.
Yeah. So don't yell at him or she'll show up.
Yes. That is the specifics of what happened on the night that I ultimately subsequently got my job.
Or Erica.
Somebody spoke sharply to Jonathan because Jonathan was running around and kind of had
the zoomies.
And had Erica. Erica was just kind of, at her wit's end with the sound of Jonathan running back and forth upstairs in the old stone house. And, the idea was, he's just a little boy. Talk to him like you're his mother. And so, Jonathan, you knock that off right now. Well,
Kate didn't like that.
Kate didn't like that. Kate made a full body appearance there in the shop and basically scared the bejesus out of Erica. And at that point,
She was done.
yeah, that was it. So,
Wow.
but yeah, Kate and Jonathan have also been recorded together on an EVP when there wasn't anybody else in there. They had left a recorder in the old stone house, and
you hear Jonathan crying, and then you hear Kate comforting him.
Yeah, and Kate comforting, and then a couple of footsteps towards the recorder, and then the recorder shut off.
Oh.
So Kate did not think it was appropriate that they were recording Jonathan being upset like that. But yeah, that's just Kate and Jonathan.
Yeah, back in the old carriage house, we have what we like to call our Stephen King vampire. It's a ghost, but it does the floaty kid thing. So if you look at the door that you can access from inside the Poe Museum, right above it, there's a window in the roof line. There's no way to physically look out that door.
Sorry, cat.
Behind me, am I about to be attacked? But yeah, there's no physical way to look out that window, but people have seen a silhouette of a child like looking out the window there. So floating kitty vampire. There's also a woman that has been seen in that one and a gentleman as well. So we actually think this might be the family that lived there while it was a tea house. We do know that they had a young boy there. He also passed away fairly young as well. The ghosts have made friends with the two cats at the Poe Museum in that house, to the point where Pluto, actually, you can see Pluto getting pet by the entities.
Oh, wow.
And his fur rippling, as if somebody's stroking the back.
Yeah. And then there is the memorial building.
Oh, God.
The memorial, oh, God.
I don't go in that building either.
Yeah,
That's a nope.
That's a nope building for Beth. It's an absolutely fascinating building, and for me at least,
I find it fascinating.
Yeah.
I just don't like the entity in there.
Yeah, and well, they don't bother me. But the memorial building has the distinction. It's actually the only building on the property that the Poe Museum built after taking the property over.
And it has a basement, which is a rare thing in Richmond.
But most of the building is actually an artifact in its own right. Much of the material came from either the wreckage of the Southern Literary Messenger, where Poe had worked during his life here in Richmond, or in particular, the staircase that's in there came from one of the Allen townhomes that was getting demolished in the 1930s as well.
I believe it was the one on 14th Street.
Yeah, I think 14th Street, which would have been just kind of at the lower corner of like Capitol Square. So they went ahead. The Poe Museum salvaged as much of the material as they could, in particular from the household. They got the set of stairs, and then there's actually the fireplace mantle in the old stone house is also from the Allen townhome. But we think that what's going on in the memorial building, and since it's a museum overall, that there some of the activity that goes on there is associated not just with the family who had lived there for so many generations, but that also some of the artifacts that have been brought.
That's what I wanted to ask when we started talking about the Poe Museum. For some reason, I was like, there's some kind of haunted thing in there. I know it.
Probably more than one haunted thing.
Yes.
But the stairs are the big one.
Yeah, the stairs are the big one. It is one of the very few malicious entities that we seem to have in the city of Richmond. We with as many ghost stories as we have from one end of Richmond to the other, almost all of them, the spirits are fairly benign or actually outright nice. This is one of those exceptions. The people over the years on those stairs have experienced, getting hit, getting pushed, and stuff like that on the stairs, which particularly when you're walking down the stairs, getting pushed is something that's not good.
Yeah.
A friend of ours that worked there, actually, before they did some renovations, her office was in the upstairs level there of the memorial building. Well, one day she was coming down the stairs and she wound up falling and broke her leg on the landing.
Nice.
In hindsight, she thinks that she thinks that she was pushed.
Wow.
So we think that there's a good chance, certainly nothing for certain, but that it could be Mr. Allen, John Allen. And we think that because Mr. Allen was a bit of a character in his life. He did not approve of Poe's lifestyle. Mr. Allen was a businessman, and he was bound and determined that Edgar, when he came in under his roof, that he was going to make Edgar a businessman. And when Edgar was bound and determined to be an author and not a businessman, let's just say things did not go so well with the Edgar and John relationship, basically from that point forward. So the fact that something of John Allen's wound up being a kind of critical feature in a museum that is effectively dedicated to Poe.
Yeah, not to Allen.
Yeah, not to Allen. I think that might grate on him a little bit.
Be pretty PO'd about it.
We can add into that was known as the Eliza Poe Memorial Building. So the fact that it's dedicated to a actress.
Yes.
And John Allen was known for not being very kind to the women, and it actually seems to be women that are mostly affected on that staircase. Come here, Beth.
Yeah, that seems to be kind of a. Well, I mean, I guess it makes sense historically. That does seem to be a common theme, though, of kind of these chauvinist ghosts that still kind of lash out towards women. I've seen quite a few different times that's been the case.
Yeah,
get over it, guys.
Yeah. Well, we say if you're a jerk in life, you're a jerk in death.
Yeah. Some of them don't let it go.
Yeah.
Let it go, buddy. I don't know if you know what year it is now.
Yeah, maybe they do, maybe they don't.
I don't know.
So kind of staying in Richmond, I was looking at the website. So we are both alumni from VCU.
VCU.
Oh, okay.
Details.
So, and I'll be honest, like I don't really know a whole lot. So is there any kind of ghost tales from Monroe Park and kind of the VCU territory down there?
Quite a few.
We have a whole tour around that.
It actually started because of VCU Family Weekends. They wanted something on campus, and so I went to research.
Yeah. So pretty much from the time that we took the company over, we were very fortunate that we've had a good working relationship with the VCU, particularly surrounding the VCU Family Weekend event that's typically in the early fall. And we started off with like one of the very, very first year, 2016, when we took the company over. At that point in time, we still just had 3 tours. There was a little bit of some logistical issues with the first year that we did. Everybody still had a good time, but we tried basically bringing people into town and doing one of our tours that are closer to like the middle of downtown, a couple of miles away from the VCU Monroe Park campus. Again, some logistical issues. So the following year and for a couple of years thereafter, we actually resurrected what was our 4th tour, which is the Phantoms of Franklin, and offered that starting from Monroe Park.
Because it does actually feature 3 buildings that VCU owned or does still own.
Yeah. But even that was still a little bit of a walk from the Monroe Park campus. So after doing that for, I think, 2 or 3 years, we went ahead and really put our nose to the grindstone and managed to come up with a tour that we know as our Creepy Tales on Campus, which revolves completely around the VCU Monroe Park campus. And we officially launched that just a couple years ago. It was October of 22 when we rolled that tour out. And yeah.
Yeah, it's also our first tour that's not just ghost stories. We do have a couple of murder or cursed stories in there. So the dark history, so it's kind of a little branch out, but it made a good tour. And the fun thing is when we go over to Honors College, of course, that building is in a former hospital. And since it's VCU Family Weekend, we have a lot of freshmen on our tour, and we always get every single tour. Yep, you're right. She does this. She does that. She does that. This just happened last week. So we get that confirmation from the students that the ghost there's still active.
And that's as much work as we wind up putting into like any new tour that we roll out. One of the best parts of rolling out a new tour is that you have people start coming out of the woodwork and saying, "Oh, you have a ghost tour that walks by such and such building. Well, have you heard about this?" And so we
actually had one of the former presidents of Mason's Hall be like, "Hey, you just started the VCU. Do you know the Millheiser House?" I'm like, "Yes, I feature it. What's your story?" And so he confirmed one of the stories that we had.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a lot of old buildings there.
Oh, yes.
Franklin, all those beautiful old, I'm sure used to be houses, people's houses. Yeah.
That is amazing. That's the heart of Gilded Age Richmond. Most of the buildings there are post-Civil War buildings. In particular, 1880s, 1890s. But yeah.
Showing off of the wealth.
Yeah, showing off of the wealth. That was still the era before the income tax was introduced. And so you had, and also antitrust really wasn't a thing yet either. So it was the age of the robber barons, if you will. And you had individuals that were amassing huge fortunes, and they wound up going out and picking a part of town and making it their own. And for Richmond in that era, it was that stretch along Franklin Street, which has now been incorporated into the VCU Monroe Park campus.
One of my favorite streets.
Yeah, absolutely beautiful over there.
Love those buildings. Yeah. I got to spend a lot of time in Franklin Terrace. That's where the art education department's at. So that was my home away from home for a while. Yeah. So what's the best haunted stuff over in that part of town?
I'd have to say my favorite story is probably Ginter's story.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's another one that's a case of an artifact that's haunted. So Louis Ginter, won and lost 3 fortunes before he made his 4th one with rolled cigarettes, and built the house over on Franklin Street, lived there with John Pope, his longtime associate, most likely lover as well. They never fully came out, but we're pretty sure they were. But he also had a long time friendship with a child friend back from New York City, and they always would write letters. Unfortunately, we have lost his name to time. We have not been able to locate it, but they were pen pals for many, many years, and they were complete opposites. Ginter lived his life. He went out and did things. He traveled, while his friend actually did his living through books. And he was like your number one book hoarder. Anytime he had spare money, he got another book. Ginter actually witnessed how many books he had, and that he was living in this small itty bitty 1 studio apartment in a brownstone walk-up in Brooklyn. And he decided he was going to help his friend by sending him a monthly stipend. And he asked his friend to take better care of himself, move into better accommodations, buy new clothes, food, etc. When he went back about 9 months later, same apartment, same threadbare clothes.
More books.
He had to come to Jesus talk with his friend. And finally his friend agreed, okay, yeah, I'll take better care of myself. About another 3 years go by, and Ginter gets a letter saying, I'm not doing well. I'm probably not going to make it. I would like to see you again. So Ginter rushes up to New York to see his friend, and his friend tells him, thank you so much, for taking care of me. I don't know how to repay you. You've done so much for me. And Ginter says, you can leave me your books. I want to understand how you lived your life. Excuse me. And so when his friend passes away, the books are packed up and they're shipped here to Richmond, and they're put in that beautiful house on Franklin Street. And every night, Ginter is in the library reading. The staff reports that they know John has gone to bed. They know Mr. Ginter's by himself, and he's having a conversation with another man in the room. And they don't recognize his voice. They never see anybody go in or out. But it is an in-depth discussion about whatever book Mr. Ginter's reading.
Wow.
When Ginter passes away, the house goes to Grace Arnett, and she actually opens up the first library in Richmond before the Dulia Library is opened up, which is now the Main Street Library.
And for reference, Grace Arnett was his niece.
Yes.
So basically his only living relative.
Yeah. So when the Dooley Library opens up, she donates all of Ginter's library to the Dooley Library, and it starts the special collections.
Wow. So
then the staff over at the Main Street Library starts reporting one of those Ginter books was out last night. Why was it left out last night? And then they started hearing two men discussing said book.
They're still talking about those. There's so many books. They had to keep reading them in death.
Yes.
So yeah, this is a traveling pair of ghosts now with this set of books.
Definitely one of our favorite stories that we have in Richmond. And we're also very fortunate that because of the nature of it, we can share it at two locations. We share it on our Creep Tales on campus when we walk to the Ginter house, and it's also featured on our Phantoms of Franklin tour because that one walks by the library. So,
as a lover of books, I also really enjoyed that story. I felt the no-named man. I felt his pain of having the money and wanting to buy them more books.
Yeah, we have quite the mountain of books here, so we get it.
It's like I'm not allowed to buy more books until I read 3 more.
I know, but then you see one. We have a question from CMC Airboss. He wanted to know if you guys have ever been to colonial New England. There's lots of ghosts well outside of Salem.
Yeah, so
we grew up in New York and England for myself. So yeah, I've been to colonial New England. I've been to a lot of places in Massachusetts and run into quite a few things.
I think as of thus far, the only ghost tour we've taken up there though is Mystic.
Yeah.
Mystic, Connecticut.
Yes.
Yeah, beautiful town and fantastic ghost tour, which was run by Seaside Spirits.
Yes.
Or Seaside Shadows.
Seaside Shadows.
Seaside Shadows. They have do tours in a couple of the smaller coastal colonial towns up through that area, but that's who we took a tour with in Mystic. Absolutely loved it. We have been, you've been there more than I have. Salem. Yeah,
I've been to Salem. I didn't take a ghost tour, even though I was living in Boston at the time. I usually had to catch the last train back before I couldn't get home.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which did not allow me to take a tour, but definitely extremely haunted in that area. Concord, I've been to. Boston, extremely haunted as well. So a lot of things out there.
Yeah, but still, surprisingly, that the only ghost tour that we've taken in that general region was the Mystic one.
Oh darn, we need to go traveling.
Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting. Lots. Of course, Salem is a big thing. We got to go to Salem a couple of years ago. Well, it's probably been longer than that now. I had never been to Salem. What did you guys think of Salem? Did you guys have any specific stories to share from there?
I got followed through the House of Seven Gables. That one was fun.
And really, for me, that was the highlight of the day trip that we took there, was visiting the House of Seven Gables. We walked around town a little bit more and checked out some of the shops. But as far as my historic experience with Salem, that was pretty much it for me. It was a short trip for us.
Yeah. When I used to live there and I would go up periodically, I love being there on Halloween, especially the evening activities that they have with the parades. The pumpkin carving is amazing. And of course, they bring out the whole Hocus Pocus. I was like, what's that movie? And so being able to go around and see those sites, those locations for the film as well was really awesome.
That's
it's
cool.
Halloween. I try to explain to people. So I'm a Virginian pretty much, but my dad was stationed in Newport, Rhode Island in the Navy for 3 years. So when I was a kid, I was in Rhode Island for 3 years, and I try to tell people in New England, they do Halloween to a different level. Like you can do a cool Halloween in Virginia, but in New England, Halloween is like a full on thing. So yeah, they do it up pretty well up there.
Yeah, I grew up in Vermont, and so having your local police sheriff have the haunted house in the neighborhood when you're out trick or treating,
Yeah.
with the jump scares and everything. And I mean, that was the best childhood ever. They also would turn the old police academy into a haunted house as well, and it was a fundraiser for the fire department and the police academy. So it's like it is. You eat, you breathe, you live Halloween from September through the beginning of November.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds magical.
Yeah,
it is.
It is. Overall, that is a region that we've delved into doing a lot of research on ourselves. We do. It's not a podcast per se.
It's Facebook Live.
Facebook Live shows. Mm-hmm. And we've done Facebook Live specifically on Salem. Mm-hmm. We've done it on a few of the New England states, mm-hmm. which of course dove in and talking about some stuff in the colonial era. Rhode Island. Yeah. Rhode Island has a absolute
plethora of haunted locations.
A lot of haunted locations, and a lot of them do date back to the colonial era. Mm-hmm.
Colonial and the golden era.
Yes, the golden era, but yeah, the colonial era, and even really the even just like the dawn of the colonial era, because Rhode Island had quite a few stories that were related to the natives that are there too. Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, New England in general, so much spooky stuff up there. It's hard to know where to start.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask specifically because you had mentioned earlier we were kind of talking about Gilded Age and kind of the captains of industry or the robber barons and that kind of stuff. And I was curious if you guys had been to Newport, where the mansions and stuff there are on the cliff walk.
Nope, on the list.
Yep, not yet.
Because I was curious. I've been in some of those houses. I guess you call them houses. They call them summer cottages.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Look up the Marble House if you're curious at seeing what a small summer cottage looks like.
Even the Carey House that What We See in the Shadows was based on is up in Newport.
Yeah, and there was the old soap opera they did a remake of too. I'm trying to remember. I'm not going to be able to remember the name of it. Someone will message me. There was an old spooky soap opera that was based out of that too.
I'm blanking on it myself.
Yeah, the vampire.
Someone will remind us in there. But I was curious. Yeah, I imagine there has to be some crazy ghost stories from that place as well, just because there's been so much.
Yeah, and a lot of them were collectors.
Yeah.
So they imported stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just so much wealth. Yeah.
What is that mansion we were talking about not too long ago with the monk? I'd have to go back and look. But he imported 3 ghosts. One of them was a monk. Another one came with a suit or armor, and I can't remember what the third one came with. I was like, will you stop buying antiques?
Yeah. So
Dark Shadows.
Yes, Dark Shadows.
Yeah.
I was just Googling it.
Yeah, I just put it in chat. I remembered the name of it. They did a remake of that, somewhat in the recent past, and evidently it was a hit again, and I never watched it, but maybe I should.
No, I can't say I did either, but yeah.
So I'm kind of curious for people who are in the area are looking to come from Richmond. What kind of, compared to places you've gone, how does Richmond kind of rank for a place to go check out spooky stuff?
So, obviously we're a little biased, but Richmond is way up there as far as the sheer amount of spooky stuff that we have to talk about.
We've got 6 tours. So.
Yeah.
There's no lack of haunted places.
No.
Yeah.
It's gifted us with enough material that we have 6 different walking tours, each of which last, about an hour and a half. So if you went ahead and you wanted to throw it all together, basically 9 hours of walking tour material across the city here. And if you go ahead and you get into some of the speaking engagements that we do, like single location speaking engagements, we also have a small library of material for stuff that's outside of our walking tours, stuff that just a little further afield.
We can send you down Route 5 and tell you all the plantations and places to stop along the Cap Trail.
Yeah, and all the ghost stories that go with it. It's the amount of spooky material that we have here in Central Virginia. Just it really, I guess you could say, it punches above its weight as far as the amount of spooky stories that we have here, in comparison to the general size, the population of the area. There is so much here. And that's just what we have that makes for good stories. We regularly have people reach out to us with, do you know anything about this apartment building or this house or something like that? And, we don't necessarily. I mean, it could just be your regular run-of-the-mill family home that's been there for maybe 100, 150 years.
Yeah.
That maybe nothing, spectacularly out of the ordinary or historically notable occurred there.
You just have residual footsteps going through your building.
Yeah. But yeah, there's so much here in Richmond and in Central Virginia to work with that we find ourselves really lucky with what we've kind of been able to find, and we consider ourselves very privileged with being able to go ahead and share it with people like we do.
And we also have the luck of the fact that we had a lot of prolific paranormal writers here in Richmond that would write about their experiences with Margaret DuPont, Virginia Hawes, L.B. Taylor. Plus, we also posted it in our newspapers early on. So we have a good research base to go from.
Yeah, Richmond's always been kind of weird.
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah,
there's other weird cities in the country, but Richmond is definitely on the top 5 of weird cities.
Yep. Yeah. I love it when you don't see it. Yeah, obviously, the whole RVA thing, that is the bumper sticker for Richmond and for Central Virginia. But occasionally you see the one that's like, keep Richmond weird or keep Richmond spooky. Yeah. That's our mantra, keep Richmond spooky.
Yeah,
but it's a thing here.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Lunar Paloma wanted to know if you guys have investigated or know of things in Maine.
Bar Harbor.
Yeah, Bar Harbor, Mount Desert Island, which is basically the island that comprises Bar Harbor and Acadia National Park. We did an entire episode on ghostly occurrences in that area,
dating from Native American tales all the way up to the Gilded Age and a little bit beyond. So extremely haunted location. We haven't dove too much into other locations. I need to do a Maine episode.
Yeah,
it's on my list. We're basically trying to work our way through the 50 states, and I usually have a part 2 and a part 3 by the time I'm just beginning research.
So where can people find what you're talking about?
YouTube, yay!
Yes, we do have a YouTube channel, but we basically roughly every other Monday, we'll record a live show on Facebook. Usually lasts about an hour. We'll record, we'll interact, we'll answer questions and that. And at the end of the recording, we go ahead and we'll then in turn upload that to YouTube. So if you're interested in this other research that we've done for stuff that's outside the Richmond area that we've shared, you can find it on our Facebook page. But I honestly would recommend checking it out on YouTube.
It's easier to search on YouTube.
Much easier to search on YouTube.
And we have over 90 episodes.
Over 100 episodes.
Over 100 now.
Nice.
Yep.
So I got it. I just subscribed. I shared it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's what I had to do when COVID hit and I was crawling the walls because I had no job.
Oh, wonderful COVID. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So Chris told me to write scripts and I did.
Yeah.
You know,
it was, yeah.
There's always, with the darkness, there's always light. And I feel like that's been one of the stories of us doing this podcast is like we get to talk to so many interesting people that are doing things and all kinds of paranormal and supernatural stuff. And so many were like finally able to get the time and be like, I'm going to do this. And COVID is the thing everyone has in common.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that one, I mean, we weren't even really aiming to do anything in particular. You were just...
I needed something literally to stop me from crawling up the wall.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
My day job as a civil engineer, I was able to go and work remote from home. But while I'm sitting there doing that, Monday through Friday, sitting on my computer on the couch, she's at the other end of the couch, either her nose either in a book or sitting there kind of twiddling or watching the clock, and she's metaphorically climbing up the walls. And so I finally said, you know what, do some research, pull some stories together, and we're going to go do Facebook Live this coming Monday. Mm-hmm. And so for about 3 months, we did a show every Monday. Mm-hmm. Because you had all the time. And once the world started slowly reopen, we had found that we enjoyed doing the research. We enjoyed getting online and talking about the stuff. And so we kept rolling with it. We just wound up spacing it out. Mm-hmm. So typically we're doing shows every 2 weeks now, and every once in a while it might be every 3 weeks or something like that.
This month's a little wonky because of our trip to Seattle. In fact, our next show is Monday, and we are going to talk about haunted Seattle.
Yeah.
But then we're off for like 2 weeks because of the trip, and then we'll come back to our normal schedule.
Yeah. It also, we were supposed to be going this past Monday, but
his a little flip clamped here.
I could barely talk on Monday, so that wasn't happening. So but we've gotten over 100 episodes now, and every episode revolves around either a location, whether it's a state or a city, or sometimes it's a theme like haunted hotels or haunted highways or something like that.
We've done theater, we've done haunted Broadway, we've done celebrities, we've done pop culture.
Yep.
So there's a lot of things out there we've done.
So in other words, I have a lot of episodes to listen to.
But
when I'm cooking dinner, washing dishes, and doing laundry.
Yes. And we do warn you that the episode is run on alcohol.
Oh, that's even more. That's even more fun.
Yes.
Alcohol and cats.
Yeah. a lot of people over the last few years, a lot of people have just been tuning in. Where are the cats? What are the cats doing? And that's fine. The cats are the cats. We adore them, and sometimes they're the star of the show.
Yes, as they should be.
Well, that'll be right down the alley for Team Weird. We have cats and spooky stuff, so that's where all the boxes are checked.
Yeah.
So off we go. So head on over there. Head over to YouTube. All the links are up there on the page for those of you listening later on the podcast.
I got their Facebook and their website, and their YouTube is all pinned up at the top.
And I'll have the links listed down below. So go check it out. All right. Well, we have a little bit more time. We're already halfway through here. So let's go ahead. We got all those links up there. Go hit it up, follow it. I did follow the YouTube page. I found that and followed on there. And there's a lot of content on there, over 100 videos. So, if you're looking to go down the road,
we have more videos than followers. So please go ahead, give it a follow.
Me too, buddy. Me too.
All right. Excellent. Go hit them up. So, one other thing I wanted to say about going to Seattle, we have one of our Team Weird members who's up in that region, so I'm sure they're going to be excited.
In Seattle.
Yeah, they'll be excited to catch that episode. So there's some other places I wanted to go, but I guess I want to make sure I get to this before we run out of time, because even though it's a 2-hour show. We run out of time quicker than usually than we need to. So I want to get to the Hanover Tavern a little bit because that's where we met you at, and we were by the luck of the draw thrown into your group, and I really appreciated kind of the way the investigations are being done because as you talked about the earlier part of the show, like kind of the idea that you don't need a ton of technology to be able to go out and investigate. And I think that's a good way, especially for people who are just starting off. And so we got put with you that night. We were able to do the jail, which we talked about earlier, how wonderful of a place that is. We got to do a little bit in the tavern itself. We went over to the library. We were able to go to some interesting places. What are some of but we talked about the jail earlier. What are some of your experiences in other places at the Hanover Tavern?
Our first one actually took place in the hyphen area upstairs at the tavern. So it's the part of the building that joined both the buildings together. We were being led around by Steve Dills, who's the leader of Transcend Paranormal. And at the time, he was the president of the foundation. He was explaining to us about Barksdale's theater history there, and we were in the area where the team members would actually sleep at night, and he would talk about a little girl that was up in that area and often heard. As soon as he mentioned the little girl, both Steve and I heard her say, "Leave." We looked at each other, jaws dropped. Chris is looking at us going, "What?"
Yeah. Completely missed myself, which is typical. But what I did,
Chris, missing out on everything.
What I did catch though was the simultaneous reactions. Both Steve and Beth at the exact same time, jaws dropped. They looked at each other wide-eyed, and I'm just like, "What?" But yeah, just the fact that they had that experience at the exact same time, exact same reaction was, pretty mind-blowing in and of itself. But yeah, for anybody that maybe just real quick that hasn't been to the tavern, big beautiful structure there up on Route 301 there in Hanover County, directly across from Hanover Courthouse. For clarity, they do talk about if you go in there looking for the history, they do talk about the history of the tavern going all the way back to the 1720s. But the building that's there today started in 1791. The original tavern stood across the street, roughly in the area where the library stands today. But
Cat.
There's a box there, and that's what he wants.
Yeah. But the tavern keeper in 1791 decided that they wanted to build a home for themselves across the street. And so they went ahead, they built the first part of what is now the modern tavern. And then in 1820, the original tavern gets torn down and replaced with a building right next to the tavern keeper's quarters. And then about 10 years later, in 1830, they went ahead and they stitched the two buildings together, resulting in the structure that you have there today. So it was built in 3 distinct stages.
I guess that's why it has those weird little steps.
Yes.
As they put them together.
Yeah, and hence that very disjointed feel in the middle of the building.
And then when the Barksdale Theater moved in, it was a group of actors coming down from New York. And they found the tavern in a state of disrepair, were able to fix it up as best they could, and started the first dinner theater in the United States.
Oh, wow.
So that's where that came in, and that's how we have the theater now down in the lowest level of the tavern. And they would serve you as your waiters and waitresses before the show, and then you would see them in the show, and then afterward, sometimes there would be another event, sometimes not, depended on what they were up for.
Yeah.
Wow.
But today, the tavern still does... the tavern itself doesn't run the theater events anymore.
Yeah, it's partnered with... Virginia Rep. Right now, they're only doing 2 shows there. So the tavern has been starting to bring in other companies that would do traveling shows. They just had the night with Poe where you had 3 actors performing different works of Poe's and a theatrical demonstration, and then they would actually create a cocktail to go with each of the stories.
Which was it was a lot of fun, that event.
It was amazing.
We might have to see if that comes through again. That sounds like
they're trying to bring it back. So.
I'm sure it will, because it was a very successful event for everybody involved.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so you can go, you can catch a show there. You can have dinner there. The food is fantastic.
It was. We got to eat there.
Yeah.
They have tavern teas, usually 3 a year. The next one's actually going to be July 28th, but it's a fundraiser for a charity. And then, of course, they'll have a tea at Christmas again. So those are a lot of fun to do. They have the educational month of March, where we do field trips for the 4th graders in the county. So they get to learn about colonial, Civil War, and post Civil War life at the tavern.
Yeah, but there's always something going on there.
Yeah.
Live entertainments, food to eat.
Mm-hmm. They do wonderful pairings with local wineries and breweries and cideries.
Yeah. So yeah, if you're in the area, or even if you're just coming to visit the Central Virginia, definitely recommend putting Hanover Tavern on the itinerary for going up there for a visit, and better yet, if they're having one of their paranormal events there, to check that out.
And they do have a ghost tour that runs once a month. I believe it's the 3rd Thursday.
Yep, third Thursday of the month.
So you can definitely go up for that as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, I will say, so we were able to go for the Paracon they had there recently, and I had not heard of it before then. We have been doing the podcast.
It's weird because we lived here forever.
Yeah,
that was only the 3rd year, right?
Yeah, that was the 3rd Paracon.
We had a break because of COVID.
Well, no, it started post-COVID.
No, it was supposed to happen when COVID happened, but
it got postponed. There was not a pre-COVID. However, in any case, we digress.
We had kind of moved back to the area. We were living up near Charlottesville, like we're in Orange County, so we had kind of moved back to this area recently. And we were like, well, we've been doing this podcast for a few years. We need to start getting out and getting into some more Paracons and meeting people locally who are doing, the stuff that we're into. So we were like, okay, well, we'll go check out this Paracon. I don't really know much about it, but it's close by. It'll be something fun to go to. And then as we started getting ready for it, we had a bunch of different guests from other parts of the country who were coming on the show. And they were like, so what do you have coming up? And they're like, oh, well, we're going to be at the Hanover Tavern Paracon. And I'm like, you guys are going to be there. We're going to be there. So it's just like within a very quick amount of time, it turned into like all these people that we were having on the show, and some people that we have known that just in real life that had investigated in other areas were all like coming to that Paracon. So it was, and I will say, if you're looking at going there, if you were to try to find a haunted place to have a Paracon at, it was perfect because of that theater and the restaurant. I mean, everything is just ready to go.
Yeah, it's an amazing site. And they have amazing full-time staff there that look after both the, just the general health of the tavern, with the historic preservation aspect, and then all the folks that work there pretty much full time in the restaurant. They do a great job of keeping the tavern up to snuff, if you will, and not only keeping it up to snuff, but in continuing in the historical preservation and improvements there. And then they do get a fair number of volunteers that roll out of the woodwork as well for some of the special events. That's where people like Beth and I come in. We
started with the Paracon stuff, but then ended up getting pulled in as board members. So Chris just went off the board. I just came on the board. Yeah. So we're always up there volunteering. In fact, I was just at the last tea last weekend, and this coming weekend we're helping with the load in of the antique weekend.
Yeah. So not this weekend, but next weekend they're going to have their annual antique show, which is basically they got a whole bunch of antique dealers from really all up and down like the mid-Atlantic are going to be coming in with truckloads of antiques, and they're going to be setting up shop in the tavern this next weekend. The stuff will be for sale. There is admission to it. The admission is what goes to the tavern. It helps to that's part of what helps to support the tavern. That in and of itself is a great event, even if, it's a great opportunity for people to go antique shopping. And even if you just like to look at antiques, it's a good opportunity to do that.
Go buy some haunted stuff.
Yeah.
There have been times we've loaded in and I'm like, that piece.
Nope.
Yeah, but the spooky stuff, of course, is how we initially got involved. We were very fortunate that just a couple of years after taking over Haunts of Richmond, we were, trying to not only grow the business, but to also highlight other things in the local paranormal community. And I think it started with I went ahead and on our Facebook page, I shared a couple of their
investigations.
I don't know if it was investigations or if it was their ghost tours. But either way, I shared a couple of their events that they had going on to our Facebook page, like, hey, if you like our tours, go check this out. And then they reached out and said, hey, we got an investigation coming up. You want to come on up and help us with the investigation? And it was the start of a beautiful friendship. So, and I say they, the folks that do pretty much all the investigations up there are done by a group, Transcend Paranormal. So very, very good friends with all the folks there at Transcend. And we still occasionally get to go ahead and participate in some of the investigations that they offer, not just on the Paracon weekend, but some of the other stuff that they do at the tavern and at other spooky locations across Central Virginia.
And if we can't personally go, our guides are more than happy to go in our stead. So.
So we have a couple of guides that are very well versed as paranormal investigators as well.
Yeah, that was another very cool thing about that. A very cool thing was just seeing all the different groups that were kind of working together there. It was just cool to see that there was like friendships between the different paranormal groups and stuff that were all there. And it's a very good vibe for the whole thing for sure. Did you want to speak about a little bit about that, Jenny? Because we have our own little show that we do called Weird Hauntings over on YouTube. And we did our show. We did the Witching Hours from there as well. So we had, it was a pretty good place. We definitely had some experiences there.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you guys, since you've investigated there, often or many times, plus the people that investigate there all the time. What happens? What kind of things are going on in that room? It's like, it looks like the tavern has the bar, that small room.
The cage bar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What happens in there?
So we have a former owner who actually shows up in the cage bar himself. We do an event called Ghost Walks at the second weekend of October, right?
Oh no, it's the
third weekend.
The last weekend of October before Halloween.
It all blends together at that point.
Yeah.
But we have usually David Deals portraying that ghost encounter, and that happened when they actually found the cage bar, and the construction crew was just absolutely enamored with what they had found. And then they started to hear noises and somebody saying hello to them. So that was the first experience in there. When we did the Ghost Walks at Night this past year, I was actually one of the guides leading the groups around. And when we got into that room, I noticed David started his spiel, and right behind him, he had a shadow figure mimicking him.
Oh.
And I was like, David, by the way, the ghost is with you. Make sure you get it right.
So, the really interesting thing about the cage bar is that it's a very recent restoration for the tavern. It was only done just a few years ago. Before that,
there were restrooms in there.
Yeah, it was. it was a disused space for a number of years, because when the theater folks had come in, they went and they renovated it into a restroom and basically boarded up a lot of those original features that made it this very defined cage bar. And it's very difficult to describe what a cage bar is. Like
it looks
sense.
Like a cage. Okay, so it has a sheet that comes down that's slotted. And that's to lock off the liquor and everything else back there, so nobody can have access to it. But it also has a mail slot. It also is where you would have posted lists of important information for people in the community to come and see. It would have been where you got your food orders. They would have been brought up to the kitchen and then brought out via the cage bar.
Yeah.
As a medium, I had an experience in there. And the fact that you said that it used to be a restroom just cracks me up, because what I experienced in there, which one of my friends who's also a medium was in that space, experienced something very similar. There's a lady in there who used to be a waitress, and she's very flirty. She likes to like whisper into people's ears. And the fact that that was a bathroom at some point, like, because that's where she hangs out, would be just hilarious, because I can just see her messing with people while they're in the bathroom.
We have a lot of good bathrooms in this area.
So that was what I experienced, was a lady, a flirtatious lady.
And a guy too, right?
And a guy that's like, they're from the same time period, which maybe is the guy that you guys have seen.
No, there's another guy there.
Oh, there's a different guy.
Yeah, we just discovered this about a year and a half ago.
And it's still so recent that I would say the amount of evidence that's been gathered still puts it pretty much in the theory realm.
Yeah, so we think it might be one of the actors from the original Barksdale.
Oh.
Because that's what he seems to be talking about when we make contact with him. But he also seems to be a bit of a confused entity. So maybe he hasn't quite figured out what has happened to him.
Oh, yeah.
And we do know right after we had the first contact with him, one of the original founders actually had just passed away.
Oh.
So we're not sure if that may be the correlation. He returned back to the theater.
Interesting.
That's interesting. Yeah, we have some video of it. Maybe I'll send you guys an email with a little clip of that part so you guys can check it out. Because it was like essentially what we do with that is I just take her to places and she has no background, and it's just like, this is what we get. And so we had our table upstairs where we were doing the podcast at, and so we just walked around the building a little bit, and then she was like, all right, I got something here. So I just started filming. And so without any prior knowledge of what's going on there, we got some interesting things, which has been kind of an interesting thing, because sometimes even if you get something else to look into, if nothing else. There was some things we had at Lake Shawnee in West Virginia as well. So interesting. It's definitely a good place if anyone's interested in and there you go. If you're interested in having a little spooky vacation, Richmond is a wonderful place to check out.
Yeah.
And it rarely disappoints on an investigation. They always end up having some sort of interaction, usually in the tavern and definitely in the jail.
Yeah, the tavern and the jail are the two
big
hottest spots. But there's been enough activity in the other locations, the library, the courthouse, the clerk of courts buildings, that it definitely makes them all very much worth checking out on any given investigation. But, just given the nature of an investigation, it's so easy to get spoiled on the idea of like you're going to have all this activity or something like that if your experience with investigations comes from watching the TV shows. It's just so easy for that, because they're taking hours and hours and hours of investigative material and distilling it down to 30 or 60 minutes.
Yes, when there was things happening.
Yes. And of course they're only highlighting when things happened. It's any given night at the tavern, even as short of a stretch as one of these investigations is, which, to be clear, usually when you go up to Hanover Tavern and join them on one of their investigations, you're going to get 45, 50 minutes in each location as you rotate around, which is, relatively speaking, a drop in the bucket for investigation time.
Yeah.
But very, very rarely do folks come away from there after doing their rotation through all of the buildings and saying, no, we had absolutely nothing happen tonight. Usually you get a little something, at least in at least one of the buildings.
If not a really good interaction.
If not a really good interaction, that definitely makes an investigation at the Hanover Tavern and its associated buildings up there. I would say it's a must-do for paranormal investigators.
And there's actually a theory that one of the local groups is working on, CPRI, Center for Paranormal Research and Investigation. They are working on a theory that the more a place is investigated, the more active it gets. And they're trying to be able to prove that through a couple of different haunted historic locations that are having investigations. So they help out at Bacon's Castle. They help out at Hanover Tavern. They're at John Marshall House with us. Plus a couple of other historic preservation locations.
That's interesting. I kind of feel like that's kind of become kind of a hot topic with paranormal investigation, is like the idea of increasing. But have you guys gone into the idea of like paranormal investigation creating those kinds of things as well? Yeah,
we've discussed how it can manifest. With a belief system. And actually the Myrtle's Plantation is an excellent example of that. The story of Chloe, there's no record of Chloe, no historical record of her at all. But that story is there. It is legend. Everybody knows Chloe killed the mother and the daughters with oriental leaves. But when you actually go and do your physical research, you can't find documentation to back that up. And so has she manifested because everybody believes she's there? And she's not the only one. There's Mary.
Are you talking about
Ocean Mary?
Ocean Mary.
And that's Rhode Island?
It's actually, I think it's Massachusetts. Okay. It's Massachusetts, but her story has been shared from a couple of different aspects in a couple of different locations. But yeah, another one where she's been talked about at some of these locations so many times.
Or the pirate she's associated with has been talked about, that now they're having these manifestations at this location.
Which has absolutely no historical basis, but it's actually starting to produce, seemingly legit evidence in paranormal investigations. Yeah, it's really
really gets things complicated.
It does. It does.
It makes you really wonder if in the 70s, when the CIA was doing all those investigations and experiments, were they onto something?
Yeah,
it's absolutely fascinating because as paranormal research is becoming more and more popular, I think it just opens up the door for all kinds of possibilities, because now there's also this idea that not only, are you getting evidence for this haunting, but now you have to figure out if it's actually someone who's deceased or whether it's like some kind of thought form or something that's been created.
And those big brains that you said we all have now, we're creating.
Maybe that's what it is. We're all making ghosts.
Yeah.
And so that's really interesting, because in a way before that was almost a way to disprove things, like, well, this story that they're telling never happened because that person never lived in that house. So there's no way it could be that person, but maybe it is now.
Yeah.
So yeah, that muddies the waters quite a bit.
Yeah,
for sure with that. Interesting.
So has there been a place that you heard was really haunted, had all these stories, and then you went and it was like, what? Disappointing?
That's a good question. I can't think of an example of that off the top of my head. because usually by the time, if something's happened enough times for it to like come to our attention, I guess. I mean, there's some veracity to it. There's already been some level of verification that there's something odd going on. Of course, you could certainly say that we've been to locations where they've talked about spooky stuff going on, and maybe nothing has happened while we personally have been there.
Yeah.
But as far as us actually finding out that perhaps a reportedly haunted location is totally bust, we personally haven't had experience with that.
Okay. Well, that's good.
Yeah, I mean, I do remember. Gosh, it's been a long time now. There was that one like bar historic location overlooking the water that Taps went and visited, and they found it had all these stories. There was the lady in blue, and then they got in there and they found that the place was almost rigged like a haunted house.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
it was in California, and very reportedly haunted location, and so many stories surrounding it. Taps found absolutely nothing amongst in the evidence that they gathered on their night there. What they did find was all of these little gimmicks that were hidden throughout the place to kind of boost up the haunted reputation.
I think there was like a swinging lamp or something.
Swinging lamps and
something in the bathroom.
Something in the bathroom mirror that made it look like there was a face and stuff like that.
Yeah, I remember that episode. That was a long time ago.
And I give them a lot of props for broadcasting that episode because it did lend a lot of, in my sense, it lends a lot of legitimacy to those who are doing like really good, like really legitimate paranormal investigations. Yeah. It's like you go in there with no assumptions. Maybe the stories behind the place and that, but you're not going to go in and you're not going to say, oh yeah, this ghost is supposedly here. We are going to talk to this ghost tonight. That's not how it works. Yeah.
And anybody who promises that is selling you a load of bull.
Yeah. That's we personally, we steer clear of like any kind of investigations where they almost like make a promise, like you were going to have like the paranormal experience of your life if you come join us. It's like, you don't know that. No, you don't know that. You don't know that. If you have found a way to put the ghosts on the payroll, well, you probably should keep it to yourself because I'm sure the IRS would not approve. But yeah, it's like that's not how paranormal investigating works. Yeah.
Except the guys in the jail over there at Hanover Tavern. I think they do want the whiskey, so you might be able to pay them with that. Yeah. We had a question from Luce. She wanted to know if you guys are doing any Paracons this year.
We are actually going to be at Nightmare Weekend as a vendor. Definitely. We've submitted for panels, but we have yet to hear back if they've been accepted.
And for reference, Nightmare Weekend is a subset of GalaxyCon. So that's coming back to Richmond for its second year. It's going to be, I think, the second weekend in October.
I want to say the 12th, 13th, 14th.
Something like that. It's like the second weekend in October, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We're, again, definitely there's vendors. We've submitted to do a few panels. We're waiting on
11th, 12th, and 13th.
11th, 12th, and 13th. So we'll see if we get those panels.
Yeah. We'll be vendors at GalaxyCon in March as well. Again,
next year.
We're hoping to submit for panels for that, but that hasn't happened yet. And they haven't opened it yet.
Yeah. And we will, of course, be at,
GalaxyCon.
Well,
Paracon.
Hanover Tavern Paracon when that happens again. We will definitely be there.
Yeah.
But that's again not until January. But yeah, so for the near future,
those are the three we have on the calendar.
Yeah. But yeah, aside from that, we don't have anything on the calendar right now. Occasionally we'll pop up at like a vendor market, but that's not necessarily like a paranormal convention. But even that, we don't have any of those on the calendar right now before Nightmare Weekend.
And where is the Nightmare Weekend again?
Greater Richmond Convention Center.
Okay.
So right here in downtown Richmond.
Excellent.
And,
CMC also wanted to let you guys know to get ready for 8:14 p.m. sunsets and 6 a.m. sunrises in Seattle this time of year.
yes. Yep. Yeah, we'll be looking forward to that. We're pretty well versed with the whole going north and south a few degrees of latitude, because we do as Beth mentioned, we're from like the New York area originally, and we travel up there several times a year. So like we know that in the middle of summer, that when we go up there, that the days will get even longer still. It reminds me, it was a few years ago, we were actually doing one of our Facebook Live shows from upstate New York. And just because of where we were, somebody chimed in on the chat. It's like, where are you that it is still magically sunlight there?
The Canada's right over there across the river.
It's like in the background over our shoulder. Yeah, that's Canada there. But so yeah, that's where we are.
And you're getting the glimmer off the river.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's amazing just how a few degrees of latitude can make the day just that much a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Mind you, my niece is at my alma mater right now, which is 10 miles from the Canadian border. She's like, it's snowing. I'm like, welcome to upstate New York.
Oh, goodness gracious.
I was like, it snowed on my graduation.
Oh, my goodness.
Snowed on her graduation in May.
Yep.
Wow.
And it was a couple years ago, we were up there for Memorial Day weekend.
And it snowed.
We got flurries.
Nothing
was sticking, but we got flurries on Memorial Day weekend. So, yeah, that's upstate New York for you.
Yeah.
We have a lot of Canadian viewers, so I'm sure they're like, yep.
Yeah, they're telling us about, because, we complained, throughout the whole winter, like we're not getting anything here in Central Virginia. It's supposed to snow. And then we get nothing. They'd be like, well, you can have this, foot that we just got. So.
We drove up there just in March.
Yeah,
we drove up, and it's like we got our dose of snow finally. When we drove up there, on the drive up, it started snowing, and by the time we got to where we were going, there was a half foot on the ground. So
that's actually what happened to us. Our son graduated from the Naval Boot Camp in Chicago. So he graduated in March. So we went through the whole winter here with no snow.
No snow.
We went up there to go visit him for like 3 days, and we had we got our dose of snow.
That was the only snow in springtime in Chicago. Yeah.
Yep.
So the kids enjoyed it though, and but the time stuff is weird, and that's another thing. If you go to Boston, if you actually look at the map, that should almost be like Atlantic time zone. So it'll get darker earlier there. So if you're not familiar with those things, it can throw you off for sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So before we run out of time, I wanted to ask, what is your dream investigation place that you absolutely want to be able to go to at some point?
The Queen Mary for me.
Ooh, yeah.
Are we talking places that you actually can, or like that is open to
It's a dream. It's a dream, Chris. It's a dream.
Biltmore,
yeah. That's another one.
Biltmore down in Asheville. Admittedly, they don't have that many spooky stories associated with the Biltmore, but still,
I've been followed around.
Yeah, it's another one of those kind of privileged places where if they had the opportunity to be able to go in there and wander around and do some investigating after dark, I think that would probably be it for me.
Yeah.
I actually had just found out about that place, and believe it or not, I'm kind of a Christmas nerd. And they do an absolutely crazy kind of decorating thing for the holidays if you want to go stay at that hotel. It looks absolutely amazing. But you might have to be an oil baron in order to get it, to afford the room. Yeah,
we actually,
it's not cheap, but it's
a lot of the local hotels, bed and breakfast do Biltmore package deals. And that's actually
awesome.
So we have not stayed on property. But we visited Biltmore several times, and it never gets old.
Yeah, we went when they had the Downton Abbey exhibit there. It was great to see those costumes in a house that was of that time period. And you can imagine that Lady Crawley, this is where she came from.
Yeah. That's cool. Well, that's good to know if we ever want to do the Christmas stuff.
Yeah, and I think right now they have a Truly exhibit there. I get emails quite often. I go, yes, please.
Awesome.
All right. And Lou said you should check out Eloise Insane Asylum. Where's that at, Luce?
Yeah.
Pronouncing that right?
It sounds familiar, but I'm blanking on.
Well, you forbid me to go into insane asylums anymore.
Wow.
Nope.
Just outside of Detroit. Just outside of Detroit, Michigan.
I think we may have talked about that one.
Was it one of the Kirkland ones?
I have to go back and look. It's
after we did 3 Kirkland ones. I was told never to do any more.
Places to check out.
Yeah, there are so many places.
In the insane asylums, they all have very similar hauntings. Very similar. And considering
so it's like a crawler or something going across the ceiling.
Screaming kids. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we don't get in like on our shows when we do them. We don't do talk about at least asylums anymore, just because honestly the stories were starting to get a little repetitive. That said, I certainly wouldn't dissuade anybody from going and doing an investigation at an asylum. There are certainly hot spots for paranormal activity. But as far as sharing stories go, we don't do that too much anymore, just because so many of the stories were just kind of getting a little repetitive just in the nature of the hauntings that happen there. Yeah. And of course, almost the same unfortunate history that can happen time and time again with, the absolutely dire state of mental health care in so many of these asylums across the country.
I would say one other place I would love to go, I've been to it, but I would love to go and do an investigation, is the Iolani Palace in Hawaii.
Ooh, yes.
Because again, amazing history, and I'm pretty sure it's haunted left, right, and backwards. But they don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Hawaiians are pretty open about their ghost stories, though.
They are,
absolutely.
Which is why I'm surprised they don't talk about the hauntings at the palace.
Yeah.
Unless you find the right worker.
Giving yourself a challenge.
Yes. I mean, I was in high school the last time I was there, so I apparently did not have the right look or way of speaking to the correct person.
Yeah.
I will say that we did get to do a couple of investigations at places that were on our bucket list down in Key West.
Yes.
So
another place, definitely go.
Yes. Okay. Did the East Martello Fort Museum, which is where the whole Robert the Doll thing is.
Oh, yeah.
So we got to do that. We got a private tour for a small group there, and then we also did the Audubon House down in Key West, which is an absolutely beautiful historic home, and we managed to go and rent that out for an evening and do an investigation there, which was very active in its own right as well.
Yes, it was.
So,
and we have an invite to come down and do the original fire station.
Yep, the fire station experience there.
With David. So.
Well, darn, we'll have to get down to Key West again.
What disappointing, right? Yeah.
Yeah, such a shame.
Yeah, Robert the Doll. I think Robert the Doll is starting to give Annabelle a little run for the money now for most famous doll. That's been a big one.
Robert the Doll has a pretty good PR crew. I will say.
Yeah. I think they both do.
David Sloan is kind of the godfather of all things haunted down there in Key West, and Robert the Doll is pretty much in his care right now. Him and the folks that work for David, and they do a fantastic tour of the fort, of which near the end of the tour, Robert's kind of the centerpiece there near the end of the tour. But
you get to meet all the other spirits first.
Yes, you get to meet all the other spirits there at the fort. It's a really good experience from beginning to end. So strongly recommended for anybody that's going to Key West.
Well, one other thing that kind of came up here at the end, and so I guess we can kind of end with that, because you give ghost tours, and you were talking about like the insane asylum and kind of like, I guess the idea that you're kind of telling a story of these ghosts, and you're also kind of sharing their history. And so maybe does that come into your mind of like the insane asylums, for instance, of like almost like not wanting to share like these negative stories, like and making that these persons like putting their business out in like a negative aspect?
I would say actually a little bit of the opposite, in the sense that I'm not saying that you should necessarily, you don't want to glorify that aspect of it. Like you need to not shy away from it. You need to make sure you're doing it justice and that you're sharing it in as respectable a manner as possible. And
more like an honorable way instead of glorifying
exactly.
it.
Yeah, it's just the very nature of insane asylums and the dark history that goes with them. It makes it very difficult to share the story in what might be considered a respectful manner. I mean, just if you're going to talk about these people, many of whom are nameless, and the horrors that were inflicted upon them, it can be a very difficult, very difficult road to walk down in trying to make sure that you do it in a manner that's not exploitative. And so, yeah.
And it's difficult for a lot of us to hear it because, I mean, we know mental health is not fully understood even today, but back then, completely dark ages for exploration of it and treatment of it. And it was harsh, and it's hard to talk about. It's hard to hear about. It was cruel. It was mean. It was not comfortable in any way, shape, or form, but you don't want to shy away from that darkness. It happened.
Yeah. And I think that the most important part is, at least for us, my standpoint is just to make sure that whatever you're doing, that it doesn't come across as that it can't be interpreted as exploitive. And I will say, I mean, without getting into too many details, knowing that we're kind of running a little short here, just that there is some material that we do steer clear from, just in general, because we haven't found a way to share it in a manner that's not going to be considered exploitative in some way, shape, or form. By and large, people come on our ghost tours to be entertained, educated, and entertained. And what we don't want to do is do what we do in a way that, again, can come across as being exploitative. We do not want to do that. And so there are some things that we will leave alone, and maybe leave to a more appropriate medium, I would say, would be the important way. It's not that we don't think that it should be shared at all. We just don't necessarily think that what we do with our ghost tours may not be the most appropriate way to talk about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess if you think of it as like, if you're having some contact with a spirit on the other side that used to be human, then there needs to be some kind of human and, have their stories shared in a way that's dignifying to a certain extent, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, it's already after 10. We hit this 2 hours and went right through it. So
last question. Are you guys planning on doing a Facebook Live about your Seattle adventure?
Well, we're doing it in advance.
Okay.
We're talking about the spooky stuff. Now we're scheduled. It's going to be this coming Monday. We're going to be doing a Facebook Live on Haunted Seattle, and then we're flying to Seattle later next week.
With a plan to visit half the places we were talking about.
Yeah,
yes.
Awesome.
So yeah, if anything, we're maybe using it a little bit to kind of pump ourselves up and get excited about it. But yes, we've done it both ways. We've done stories about places that we've visited, and then we've also done stories about places that we are going to visit. Cool. So yeah. But in this case, we're going to visit there, and we're going to talk about it before we go.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right. So for everyone out there listening in podcast land, everyone listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or iHeartRadio, wherever you're listening to us, thank you so much. Check out the links listed below, and you can find Haunts of Richmond and go check out all the wonderful things that they're doing. And if you have a moment, we would like to ask you to please like, subscribe, leave a review at any of those places to help help more people learn about this show and become part of the community. We appreciate you listening to the episode, and we will see you all next time.